Rosetta Stone that made us translate the hieroglyphic works. And we could find this out even if we refer to, for example, the Encyclopedia Britannica. My question is, how could the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, have known such minute historical detail, especially when all the other religious and historical texts just mentioned Pharaoh and not Malik, the king? Since people of the time of Revelation did not know this information or had access to the Rosetta Stone, what does this say about the authorship of the Quran? We can't find a naturalistic explanation. Now let's go to scientific. Now there's many verses in the Quran that talk about natural phenomena. It tells us to reflect and think. For instance, the Quran uses the word يَتَفَكَّرُونَ, which means for those who reflect deeply, who probe the universe. And these verses are approximately 1,000 in number that directly deal with natural phenomena. And for instance, the Quran mentions the element, the element iron. And it says something very interesting about it. It says, and we have sent down iron in which there lies a great force and which has many uses for mankind. The key word here is sent down, anzalna, which literally means being physically sent down from the sky. Now, from scientific perspective, this is actually bizarrely true. For example, Priscilla Frisch, in her article, The Galactic Environment of the Sun, states, an enhanced presence of this isotope, referring to the isotope of iron, in a geological layer indicates the recent nucleosynthesis of elements nearby in space and the subsequent transport to the earth. How could have the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him, known such a thing? Also, the function and structure of mountains. The Quran mentions that mountains have peg-like structures, that they have been embedded in the earth to prevent the earth from moving underneath it. Now, the Quran mentions it in the following way. We have placed firmly embedded mountains on the earth so it would not move under them. Also, the Quran says, have we not made the earth as a bed and the mountains as its pegs? Now, this has only been recently understood at the end of the 20th century. For instance, in the book Earth by Dr. Frank Press, he discusses and says actually mountains have stake or peg-like structures, and he uses these words. And they're around 7 to 10 to 15 times the size of the original mountain above the earth. And its function, which is quite amazing, its function is to provide an almost fulcrum point to create stability, something which the geologists call isostasy. This is why Professor Sivieda, he says, the fundamental difference between continental mountains and oceanic mountains lies in its material. But the common denominator on both mountains is that they have roots to support the mountains. And we could find the concept of isostasy in M.J. Selby's book, Earth's Changing Surface. So, how do we explain this in light of the fact that it's relatively recent science? No one at the time of Revelation knew this information, guessed it, fathomed it, discussed it, or even wrote it in poetry. Yeah. And we didn't even have the equipment to know such information. What does it say about the author? For me, we've exhausted naturalistic explanations, and it gives us good reasons to believe in the Quran. So let me just finally conclude. Although we could have good rational reasons to support the Islamic worldview, I would argue that without religion, without God, without Islam, life is absurd anyway. We are in a state of existential angst. And let me explain why. First and foremost, we may have meaning to our lives, but there is no ultimate meaning. If our ends are the same, we just pass out of existence, what meaning does that give to our lives ultimately? Does it matter if we existed at all? If the universe didn't exist, would it make a difference? This is why the philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer, he wished that the universe never existed. He even wrote an essay on suicide. Also, is there ultimate value? And the key word here is ultimate. I'm not saying you don't have value in your life, but you don't have ultimate value, philosophically speaking. Because if our lives really end in the grave, if I become worm buffet, yeah? And there's plenty of me around for the worms, yeah? If I become worm buffet, what difference does it make? If Stephen Law lived his life as an angel, and he's an angel, And if I live my life as a devil, right? What difference does it make if our ends are the same? Does it matter if some politician was trying to find answers to world peace, or the biomedic trying to find cure to cancer? It doesn't ultimately mean anything. Also, there are no objective moral values, which is going to create an amazing discussion today, I assume. And what I mean by objectives is that they exist outside of the mind. They transcend social consensus, because the humanist narrative, no matter how you philosophically justify it, is always going to rely on social pressure or fellow feeling or coming togetherness and coming to answers. For me, I can't take that, because that would justify 6 million Jews being killed in Nazi Germany, because the social pressure was there. The social consensus was there. So this is why we need an objective moral anchor. And the only concept that transcends human subjectivity is the concept of God. Now, if we're really true to our beliefs, as some atheists are, just like the Professor J.L. Mackie in his book Ethics, he said there are no true objective morals. It's just all relative. And if they're all relative, then you can't really have really strong claims against religious values or any other type of values, because it's just relative in nature. Finally, we don't have any ultimate purpose. We may have purpose, but no ultimate purpose. Because according to an interpretation of the atheistic worldview, our life is purposeless. We're just miscarriages of nature, brothers, sisters, and friends. We are, aren't we, really? We're just accidental byproducts of some kind of cosmic process. We're like nature's abortion. That's the reality. Or at best, we're here to propagate our DNA. If we read the book from, what's his name? He's the prophet of neo-atheism. Richard Dawkins, yes. As they say, atheism is a non-profit organization. So, essentially, Richard Dawkins says in his book, The Selfish Gene, he says, we're here just to propagate our DNA. So, how do we provide some ultimate purpose in our lives? Well, the existentialists like Jean-Paul Sartre, he said, you know what? We find a way out. We remove God out of the picture, then we say everything is based on nothingness. And from nothingness, we could create new meaning for our lives. But for me, that's self-delusion. That's basically saying to me, let's pretend to have purpose. That's what it's saying. So, it is no wonder, in my humble opinion, that the Quran says, and I'll say the Arabic, because in Islam we believe Arabic is a healing for everybody. And it's quite funny, there were some studies made which transcended religious affiliation. The sounds of the Quran and classical music, and the sounds of the Quran provided more healing than classical music, even though you didn't understand the Arabic. So I'm doing it as a sign of human love. The Quran says, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا اسْتَجِيبُوا لِلَّهِ وَلِرُسُولِهِ إِذَا دَعَاكُمْ لِمَا يُحْيِيكُمْ. Respond to the call of God and His Messenger to that which gives you life. Because if you really think about it, if you respond to the atheist call, do you really have a life? Or is it self-delusion? Thank you very much for listening.
I did give Hamza an extra 3.5 minutes, so I'd like to call Dr. Stephen Law to the podium, and you can have your 20